Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Gullifer. I'm a professor of sports communication here at the Steiner School, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 3 o'clock panel on sports entrepreneurship. Abraham Lincoln once said the best way to predict your future is to create it. So I'm delighted to introduce you to 3 individuals who are, in their own ways, creating the future. I'll give brief introductions of our panelists. I refer you to your program for more detail. It would take too much time anyway to list all of the accomplishments and all of the things that they've done. But to my far right, your left, is Mike Taylor. Mike Taylor is the co-founder of Agdiago, a sports tech company established and was named as one of ESPN's 11 biggest power brokers and advocates shaping the future of college football. Agdiago works primarily with college and professional football teams and coaches, identifying team cultures, right fit players with the focus on helping teams win more. Mike has worked in the sports industry for more than 25 years as a sports writer. He also works with several associations, foundations, and Fortune 500 companies. Next to him is Philip Lockwood. Philip currently serves as an assistant professor of entrepreneurship, technology, and law, and coordinator of capstone projects at Bradley University. He is a Bradley graduate. Philip earned his bachelor's degree in manufacturing and engineering technology from Bradley in 1985. He was also a student athlete while he was at Bradley. And last but not least, we welcome home Larry Larson. Larry is a sports broadcaster and the voice of the Beloit Skycarp, which is a high A affiliate of the Miami Marlins. Now Larry is also the new voice of the UIS Prairie Stars basketball. Larson is the co-founder of Clutch Sports Media, a Peoria-based high school sports broadcasting company that provides live video, audio, and social media coverage of high-profile prep events around Central and Northern Illinois. While at Bradley, Larry also was involved and participated in Braves Vision, was the managing editor of the Bradley Scout, and he graduated last May of 2022 with a degree in sports communication. Please join me in welcoming our 3 panelists. For the audience, I have a list of questions, but please interrupt, raise your hand. I will see your hand and call on you. So this works better if this is more of a conversation than it is me reading off a list of questions. And let's face it, this is for your benefit. This is not for my benefit. It's not even for the panelists' benefit. This is for your benefit. So please don't be shy about asking the questions that you want answered, and I promise I will call on you, okay? Let me start by saying that, you know, we spend a lot of time in academia, and I suppose it's always kind of been this way, preparing you for industry, jobs, careers that already exist. So, for example, we have a journalism major in our department, and our journalism majors come in focused on journalism, and we prepare them to work in news, and they leave assuming that they'll work in a news organization. In some ways, I suppose the way we even set up the curriculum in the majors doesn't really encourage you to think outside that box. That what it does is essentially prepare you for already well-established industries. We don't do a good enough job, in my opinion, of teaching you that you can be prepared for a lot of industries and you can create your own. And that you don't have to work for somebody else, you can be your own boss. And I wish we did more to encourage that. That's one of the reasons behind the panel this morning. The fact of the matter is, we don't know what industry is going to look like 4 years from now. We guess, but it's going to be different. We don't know what positions are going to exist 4 years from now, what roles are going to be required. Some will still be in existence, some are going to disappear, some are going to emerge that we haven't even contemplated yet. So the idea is to get all of you to think in terms of creating and establishing your own business, to become entrepreneurs. Now, as I talk to entrepreneurs, and in fact to a couple on the panel, what it always comes down to is this change in mindset. that what we have to do is change the mindset of young people to think in entrepreneurial ways. So my first question for the panel, and anybody who wants to answer this, is what is this mindset and how does one acquire it?
As the entrepreneurial professor, I'll take a stab at that, especially because this is one of the things I teach. The mindset is really changing what is a fixed mindset to an open mindset and looking for opportunities. And really adapting this mode of thought and mode of being, truly of active listening. Now, those of you who are studying sports journalism are actually studying that craft. So it's taking that one step further and looking at those opportunities you see and determining or even thinking, are there possibilities maybe to advance that? Or is there an area of a problem that you can solve? And if one or two have it, is that replicated by a factor of how many X across your region, across the country, or across the world? So as Dr. Gulliver said, with respect to entrepreneurship and the need for this, and I'll give you a little bit of a quick economic impact study I did at the beginning of this year and took a look at all of the Bradley majors offered and put sports in front of them, the ones that naturally would take that. The economic market assessment of that is about $919 billion. But the big number and the better number is by the end of this decade, it's expected to be almost $1.7 trillion, which means that entire industry that we're in is going to double. Now that's spectator sports, participatory, products, the media, and all the other services, and many of these are very new, so data analytics. Data analytics itself brings cybersecurity and all these other components. So what that says is not only in order to achieve that growth, it's opportunities for individuals and teams of people to come up with something new and novel that's going to meet a market need, but also any of those companies, and you can take the major players in this, whether it's the tech companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook, or whatever they will call themselves this week, and combine that with the Nikes and all of the other major footwear and apparel companies. All of them are expected to almost double their growth in this next decade. So those companies themselves are going to be looking for people who think and can act entrepreneurially.
I would also agree that, but in looking at the area of sports, I mean, sports usually bucks the economy. It didn't buck COVID a little bit. We got a little bit of a break with sports, but it didn't last long. They worked hard to get the whole industry back up as fast as they could because the economic impact was huge. But when you look at that as well, you know, I think that's the opportunity for all of you, is that when you look at the sports world and the great opportunity that's there and will continue to be there, and it will grow because there's so many things that are passing me by, like we were talking about in the last panel, where it's esports and it's fantasy sports, all of these other parts of the sports world that are growing, but it's looking for those voids within the area that you love. I mean, you love sports, you have this passion for it, and yeah, you can fall in line, and it's that mindset that we talk about, is you can fall in line and follow people and work for other people, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For at least me personally, I did it twice. I had to work. I found voids, and I had to fill those voids. And those voids were to me not necessarily problems; they were opportunities. And I talked about this a little bit earlier with somebody during lunch. Is that the other side of this, you know, what makes you go and start your own business is, I will tell you, you have to quiet the voices in your head, because the voices in your head will tell you can't do it, and the voices in your head will also tell you can. And so I will tell you to just focus on the ones that can, and also, you know, in a nutshell, you can't do it alone. And network. You're already good at communication. That's why you're here. So use that. You know, whether it be and take risks. I mean, the worst case scenario is you won't know that person, and you didn't know them yesterday. But I've known a lot of people. I mean, everybody was once a stranger. You'll never regret giving that. It's just that little bit of anxiety that goes into meeting meeting someone, but you'll be surprised. But if you have the itch for being an entrepreneur, I would start this off by saying, please do yourself a favor and scratch it.
You know, I think for me and for my business partner, Joey Wright, I think it kind of just started with thinking creatively. You know, everybody has some creativity in some shape or form inside them. And, you know, I never really thought in terms of business or even thought, okay, I'm going to be creative and do this. But for us, it was just a creative problem or a creative solution to a problem, and then it created kind of its own monster. So really, I mean, in sports journalism, sports broadcasting, whatever, everybody's creating something, right? You're creating a story, you're creating content. And for us, it was, you know, creating a solution to a few problems that we saw. So,
Well, to support the industry growth that you spoke to just a second ago, I have this from the Deloitte Sports Business Group, which I'd be interested in the panelists' reaction to some of these, but they are writing that trends and opportunities have been somewhat dormant during the pandemic, but they're expected to emerge over the next few years. They have the potential to shift centers of power in the sports business, create massive new possibilities for growth, and cross-pollinate with each other. Sports industry revenue worldwide is expected to grow at 40% annually. This year it's valued at $501 billion. By 2026, it will be $707 billion. And then Deloitte identifies these 5 trends. And I'd love to hear the reaction of any of you to any of these trends, whether these get your attention, they create entrepreneurial thinking in your own minds, or things that you think students should be aware of. But these 5 trends, first of all, number 1, we will see the blending of the real and digital worlds accelerate with growing markets for data capture and analytics, esports, NFTs, and immersive technologies. Number 2, college athletics will see some of its biggest changes ever, with student athletes exercising more self-determination. Number 3, blockchain-enabled innovations have a chance to open entirely new markets and options for fans beyond simple collectibles. Number 4, sports betting has entered the mainstream, and companies will continue their relentless pursuit of new customers. And number 5, the role and duty of sports in society will continue to receive increased attention with a focus on sustainability and mental health. Anything jump off of that?
Well, from the mental health side, and particularly where I'm at in that landscape, my company is we assess college football players, we assess high school football players, and we assess them for their behavioral strengths specifically related to football. And we look at, can this quarterback overcome adversity? Like if he throws an interception, can he come back in and is he going to throw another one? And also, how does he relate to his coach? His coach comes off the field, coach yells at him, and if he's not high in overcoming adversity, I can see that, I know the data that we have, that person starts to crumble. You then look at mental health. Mental health, we had talked about a little bit earlier on panels, that mental health with NIL, with the pressures that are coming along in sports that are far beyond the football field. I was at Ohio State and I talked about this story with somebody at lunch as well, that when C.J. Stroud got his luxury vehicle deal, and it was $150,000 cash, and he got a Bentley SUV. And in the Bentley SUV, when he got there, another teammate said, "Man, you should have got the Mercedes, the G-Wagon." And so he's like, "Oh." So he called back, traded out the Bentley the next day for the G-Wagon. I do think mental health is going to be a big deal. And we do this in what I do in my company. And by the way, the company, when you say Agdiago, just to give a little background on that, it's an acronym for a good defense is a good offense. And it was just more of a marketing ploy than it was a belief system that we believe that a good defense is a good offense. But ultimately, we did it because we wanted to not only help teams win, but we wanted to help the athletes have better fits, better experiences, better mental experiences with the teams that they're at. Because the transfer portal is growing. Players immediately are like, the grass is greener over here, I'm leaving. I think that's a huge place for me where I'm focused. A lot of my attention is not just on the wins, but it's the wins off the field, and it's taking care of the student athlete that is quickly becoming a very highly paid athlete. And that's going to be not just in football, but we're going to expand out into all the other sports as well. But mental health is definitely high on my list.
Well, firstly, the fact that companies like Ernst & Young and Deloitte and PwC, these major accounting and consulting firms, now have sports divisions. They didn't have them.
Exactly.
I bet you they did, and some of them, they didn't exist in 2019. So think about that for a moment. So they're spending millions on creating these as part of their service offering, be able to measure and analyze, because ultimately what they want to do is service that market. So in some ways, back to the Lincoln quote, they're also identifying what they think they're predicting what's going to happen. And so most in this room have, except the two, Phil, Salzer, and Lockwood, grew up in the digital age. And I have a 3-year-old great niece who can pick up my phone, even if it's locked and she's playing with apps. Okay, so that shows you, it's part of who you are now. And so the merger of digital, all things digital, especially when you look at professional sports and aspects of analytics, it's now being used at the high school level. And there's one thing to how you collect that, the next is how you interpret and use that. When I was a high school athlete, my parents saved the clippings from the newspapers. Now, parents want to save the digital stories, but they also want to have the statistics and all of that digital information so they can show those kids when they're adults. And so this whole trend is changing. So the use, definitely the convergence of the digital. The whole aspect of gaming is becoming so normalized now in this country. It used to be not so. In fact, if you look in the UK and sportswear that will not exist, and you can build a wardrobe of this stuff. It's like, who needs that? But they figure you and others are going to need that and play in that world. So it is changing dramatically.
I'm probably one of very few 23-year-olds who couldn't tell you anything about NFTs or the blockchain or anything like that. And in terms of high school sports, I hope sports gambling isn't in the picture anytime soon, because that might be a step too far. But in our realm of high school sports and broadcasting specifically, I think it was the first point of the real world and the digital world blending. I think a big challenge in broadcasting right now, not literal like play-by-play broadcasting, but in terms of putting together a broadcast product, is keeping people engaged. And people want to be as close to the action as possible. People want to relate to the athletes. People want to get to know the athletes. People want to have access. And I think a big challenge in broadcasting right now is, finding a way you can immerse the audience in that. I think you see that with like Fox, with these close-up cameras. Like after an NFL player scores a touchdown, you've got these cameras on the field in the end zone getting right up in the cameras in the player's face. It could be interviews. You see these in-game interviews on Fox during the World Series. You see it during college football. So yeah, I think things are kind of moving in that direction of access. People want to be close.
The question that goes with that, though, is to whom is the audience? Because if it's their fellow teammates, that's one thing. But I would argue, in many cases now, because sports are both so pervasive and persuasive, in some cases the audience is not their peers. It's still their family members and their adults, and especially you have a family with several kids in sports, they can't go to all the events. It's just impossible now because they overlap. So they want to be able to see the competition that brother is competing in while they're actually at sister's game, those kinds of things.
And that's why knowing your audience is so key, and we focus on that so much. We know that our broadcast audience for high school sports is probably aunts, uncles, parents, relatives who can't be at the game, also people in the community who maybe can't leave the house or can't be at the game. But our social media content is mainly the students who are at the game or the students who are playing in the game, and that's why we have photographers and videographers documenting the game from that perspective. So,
Larry, I want to follow up with you because you represent somebody who did not wait until they graduated to begin thinking in this way. I mean, you're an example of somebody who is thinking entrepreneurial as a student. So you don't have to wait till you have a degree in hand to start thinking this way. And so I'm curious, talk to us about the genesis for this. How did this start? And how did you execute this? What was the process?
yeah, it was an interesting story because, I mean, honestly, like right when we started, we never really thought about the business side. We were strictly thinking about, okay, we want to broadcast, we want to call games as much as we can. How can we do that? And we determined that starting our own platform was the quickest way to do that. Both me and Joey wanted to get into play-by-play. That's what we wanted to do after we graduated. And we got various opportunities through Bradley, through the athletic department, but we knew that if we really wanted to dive into this and be successful quicker, we needed to do it more often than, once a week or even twice a week. So we went out, we bought some headsets and soundboards, and we decided, okay, we're actually going to do this. It actually started by entering the Big Idea competition our freshman year, at the end of our freshman year. So we came up with a loose and, in hindsight, very bad business model. We showed up to the trade show where you show off your idea and talk to people about it and try to get votes. We didn't make it through that round, so we kind of tabled that idea. Ironically enough, over the summer, so Joey actually had a part-time job at the Peoria Journal-Star with the newspaper, and he got laid off. And they gave him severance. And he said, hey, how about we take some of this money and put it into a soundboard and some headsets, and we start broadcasting games. And that's what we did. We started our own website. We started our own Twitter account. And it wasn't even really a business to start. We were definitely taking a loss on it in terms of gas money and food and all the time that we spent on it. But it started with audio broadcasts on our website, just us doing it. We'd alternate who's on play-by-play, who's on color each week. And then it eventually kept growing into basketball season. And then we really had a lot of momentum in March of 2020. Playoff basketball's going on. Peoria Notre Dame and Peoria Emmanuel are set to play on Bradley's campus. Middle of the week, Bradley had just won Arch Madness for the second year in a row. It was a really exciting time, actually. And then the IHSA said, hey, this COVID thing's going on. We're going to close this Manual PND game to all audiences. We're going to let media come in. So we're thinking, oh, man, this is our huge break. Everybody's going to have to listen to us. And then, obviously, everything got canceled from there. So our momentum grinded to a halt. And then, fast forward a few months, we entered the Big Idea competition again. It was a virtual format where you had to make a video, people watched it, and then anybody could vote. We got enough votes this time to move on to the next round. We eventually got third place, got enough money to buy video equipment, and then we dedicated ourselves to video broadcasts, and that's when people actually had games, but then people couldn't be in the gym. So people had to watch through us, and then it's kind of grown from there. So that's...
And how many of your friends are in Clutch Media now?
So we've got, 10 to 12 on any given day. It kind of depends, and a lot of different people have worked for us. So it's we just try to provide opportunities. That's the bottom line. I mean, I would say obviously making money is always a goal, but I think providing opportunity and making sure that people can, try and do what they want is also probably first and foremost for us. So.
Thank you. Mike, same question for you. You have a fascinating business model, and I'd like to know how you gave birth to this. Is this something, you identified a need, you saw a problem for which you had a solution, you found a customer. What was the thinking?
It was absolute weird luck in a way. And that goes back to being attentive and just watching for opportunity. I had worked, just in a nutshell, I'd been working with the American Football Coaches Association, and I would sit in on all these meetings with all these these great coaches, and they would talk about culture all the time, and they would talk about, and I got to realize, I started realizing I wasn't certain they knew what culture was, and they certainly didn't probably know what their own culture was. They said it because they were supposed to, but they didn't really know, and so I kept hearing that, and for 13 years I worked with coaches, and finally I brought executives and coaches together to just compare leadership back and forth, leadership teams of big business and big teams. And one of them, who ended up being a co-founder of mine, I went to visit him out east at his tech company, and he had just put a $27 billion merger together. And I was sitting in his office, and outside of that office, I wasn't even there for that. I was there just visiting with him, and outside his office, I hear a bunch of people talking about culture, and they were behavioral scientists. And I said, can I talk with them? And so we brought him into his office. We sat down, and literally I started talking about, can we identify culture of right fit football players? And we started to do this. I ended up, what we had to have is a scientific sample. We built that. I knew coaches, so I could get a scientific sample of at least 500 elite college football players to take an assessment. And out of that assessment, we extracted the top 5 behavioral strengths found in elite football players. We then had to go build another assessment just to make that happen and assess it. Plus, we had to do it, and it had to be a very accurate and very fast. So our assessment takes about 13 minutes. And 13 minutes, we can pretty much tell you, it's kind of creepy and cool, but we can really tell you a work ethic. Is a player team-oriented? Are they competitive? I hear journalists all the time, sports anchors and play-by-play guys saying, oh, he's a heck of a competitor. I'm like, he's not. I'm like, we actually have the data. It's not that he doesn't want to win. It's just like, no, you're thinking of it the wrong way. And so we've started to work with some journalists too as to how to understand players better. And then we started working with teams after that. I actually did. And to look at, there's times that you're going to stub your toe, you're going to fail. Those are actually the cool moments. I can't emphasize that enough, because the very first person we assessed was a person who had 29 Division I offers, and he was going to a major school. And I knew his high school coach, and he scored very, very low in the assessment. I really wanted to get physically ill in my kitchen. It was about 9:30 at night. I called the high school coach. I said, please, I want to talk to you about this young man. I said, is this right? And he said, oh my gosh. I couldn't tell the coaches that were coming through. He goes, ended up having about 60 coaches coming through his office. He goes, I couldn't tell them that they needed to really reach differently and coach him differently, because there were things I didn't unlock, and he was just that good at the high school level, but it wasn't going to translate as easily to the next level of competition. So actually it turned out our data was right. And I then reached out to the college coaches that had recruited him, and they didn't want to listen. And so unfortunately that player has played, he's in his 6th year, he's played in sparingly, but he's only really been in 3 games. He's getting a great education, which is important. But unfortunately he's never really found that part. But ultimately we kept going and talking with more teams and more teams and more teams. And now we can look at predictive analytics, because I can start to see how these behavioral strengths, and it's like playing to your strengths. I mean, when I went to college, I probably liked 4 classes. I wasn't that great of a student. And the 4 classes I liked were the ones that really hit home with me. But everything else was like some other communication class that was like, great. If somebody would have said, I will give you a C and just leave, I probably would have been like, thank you. Not because I didn't want to put the effort in, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I think that's one of the things you were talking about with colleges being more of a fertile ground and that incubator for doing what you really want to do. I think it's a scary time at times where you're like, now what do I do with this degree? But the great thing about it was, when I also started way back, people said there's no work in sports. And now that's not the case. I mean, if anything, there's an abundance of work. But But in the retrospect of all that, we kept talking with teams, talking with coaches, and the more it just keeps organically growing, and it's been a fun journey, and it's just starting. But I would just again emphasize over and over again that it's about following your passion and looking for those moments that you stub your toe, because that, like I said, that first data point was the one that wanted to make me sick, and it was actually the part it gave affirmation that we were on the right track.
Thank you, Mike. Let me pause here and see if anybody has a question you want to get in. Okay.
I got it.
Go ahead.
From the camera guy, sorry. Larry, do you think that the way that you start, what?
I knew you were going to throw a hard ball at me.
Do you think that the way you started Clutch Media, do you think that that was a lightning in a bottle thing? Because, you talked about how people were forced to watch the game because they couldn't go to it. Do you think that you would have the success that you did have if there wasn't for the pandemic? That's kind of what I was getting when you said that.
There's a lot of what ifs. I think a lot of things, in life, maybe even out.
Reasons. So there were these Frank Shorter and Steve Prefontaine were the famous American runners. But there was this British runner named David Bedford, who I thought was just the coolest guy in the world. So we'll advance now to 2004. And I was just starting this sports technology company. And the concept of the technology company was to develop timing and tracking solutions that really democratized that, so that high schools and local running clubs could time their events like the major marathons were. And so what we did develop, though, as far as our strategy, was to identify an icon event or two. So in the summer of 2004, I'm now staying at Dave Bedford's flat in London. He's now the race director of the London Marathon. And that's what really then projected us to be able from there to ultimately grow that business before I left to doing business in over 50 countries. So it was linking two different events together which really propelled that. And now maybe it's one of these things where you look at things retrospectively and think, oh wow, those were connected. But it was just this eerie feeling when I'm knocking on the door and Dave says, come in, because a mutual friend introduced us. And so from there, and so now that technology is used at the London Marathon, the Tokyo Marathon, many, many high school and collegiate events, but it really also changed that whole industry for good, in a good way as well.
I would also add on that with communication and everything, bookmark your events. I'm not saying you have to document your life, although it's a lot easier to do it now with phones and such. But I really believe that when you bookmark your life like that, and you can turn around and do a lot of retrospective, just reviews on your journey, it starts to help you map out your future as well, regardless of when that future is, whether it's 40 years old or 50 years old. I mean, my first company I started 20 years ago, and that was also just kind of I think I can do it. I had a bunch of people tell me I was stupid. My wife didn't, so I thought it was a pretty good idea then, and I kept going, with it. But I met all the people that actually led me to my second business, and that was the accumulation of again the contacts. And I would just emphasize the idea of keeping that open mind as you go through life. It's a cool journey when you're really eyes wide open.
Well, in terms of knowledge base, because these students are here to acquire knowledge, they're taking courses, and so what is the most important knowledge they should have? Is it business acumen? Is it technological proficiency? Is it understanding the audience and the customer? What should they know in order to be thinking in these ways?
Well, I can offer as a commercial, there are two courses taught at the university. Entrepreneurship 280, which is entrepreneurship creativity, which I teach, and ENT 381, which is entrepreneurship for non-business majors. So those two courses we accept any students. They're taught in Foster College of Business, or open to any students, and we go through the entrepreneurial creativity process. In the 280, it's really an introduction to the 381. The 381, we start off with understanding the mindset of entrepreneurship and then leading through the practice. And so, yes, it can be learned and learned very quickly. And so I've been teaching this for 2 years now, and people come into this course without any ideas. And I do say that because right now I'm teaching 16 engineers that have microvision. I mean, it's so narrowly focused, and getting them first and participate in brainstorming and coming up with ideas. And of the 6 teams we have working now, I would argue 4 of them should continue and turn into a business. So there are educational resources available. At Bradley, there's the Turner School for Entrepreneurship, which offers classes as well. Most of the classes, by the way, actually come from the Foster College of Business. But what the Turner's School offers are a set of lecture series, but more especially 2 competitions. In the fall, competitions known as the Social Impact Challenge, and in the spring, the Big Idea. And each of those have aggregate of $10,000 in prize money for the winning teams. In addition to that, there's the Turner Center for Entrepreneurship, which has the Small Business Development Center and provides free services for anybody in the community with an idea. But now we're working to get more and more students to go through there and take their ideas there, and can help with some of the basic mechanics of starting your business and some of the foundation elements. And the truth is that the resources that we have in the Foster College, the Turner School, and the Turner Center really are enthused to provide help and support for entrepreneurs.
You know, sorry.
And I was going to say, we even more especially are enthused to help teach people first how to say and spell that word. Because dispelling a lot of the myths that go into it, so that someone who is a student can turn around and with an idea and with some friends and a little bit of money and luck and foresight, turn it into something that truly can revolutionize the delivery of sports and sports content in a hyper-local format.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that we definitely wouldn't have the success that we have right now without the Small Business Success Center. And honestly, I wish it was something that we used a little bit more as we're going, and it's something that we'll continue to use as a resource in the future. So I would say, obviously use those classes as a resource. I didn't take any of them full frontal, but again, I wish that I did, because I learned a lot, and I learned a lot from doing the Big Idea competition and working with the Small Business Success Center. But also, I'm kind of glad I didn't go into it with a business background, because starting Clutch, I mean, if we were thinking business first and foremost, we wouldn't have even started it, because we took such a loss at the start. It was just, it probably would have seemed pointless if we were thinking about making money. So yeah, it's important to look at it from a business side, but also, I mean, don't be afraid to, it sounds cheesy, I know, dream big or think outside the box. I think where me and Joey work together really well is a lot of the time Joey will come up with an idea and say, hey, we should really do this, or we should deliver this on a broadcast, we should do something this way. And it's like a grand idea that I think is a great idea, but realistically maybe we can't do it, but how do we make it realistic? That's where I try to, toss in my 2 cents. So thinking creatively is a big thing, and thinking outside the box is obviously huge, but also being realistic at the same time, and that's where the business side comes in.
I would agree a lot, Larry, with the idea of dreaming big, but it was also the fact that building the business wasn't about looking at the numbers as much as it was looking at the passion and the fact that we had an opportunity to make a difference. And not to sound arrogant, but we really thought, and I was driving that we could change the game. We could make it better. And that's the purpose of really what we're doing in college football, is that when we go in, we start working with college football teams, they start winning after we start looking at when they get in line and in sync with their culture. I stayed focused on that. Passion drove the business, always drove the business plan for me because it was about the results anyway. But the one thing that I had to watch out for, though, is when passion gets in front of the business at some point. That would be the only thing to look out for, is that sometimes you can get so excited about the fact that somebody's feeding your passion that you make bad business decisions, or you make lesser business decisions because you're like, yay, they like what I'm talking about, so they've got a fan. But ultimately, it is still that passion, because you do recalibrate in that. And so it's not that, gosh, I have a great business plan, I have this. It's that vision first, that passion, in my opinion. And then to me, it's always about authenticated, relationships. And it's because trust is always greater than power. You can influence people all you want, but if they don't trust you, you have nothing in the end. And so to me, I want to develop that trust, and I think that's always the point of building that as you go. And it's building that, then you get the opportunity. Then you've met all these people. You've sown these seeds that honestly, they will come back and they will grow, and there will be a harvest. And you'll be like, oh, and that's why I said bookmarking where you're at, because you will start to look back and say, my gosh, I have come a long way. I have done a lot. This dream is not far-fetched, and it gives you that motivation, because some days you won't want to get up because it's tough. But it's having these things in your arsenal that can drive that. And so those would be my qualities of.
So put it in perspective, I started a global sports technology company that relied upon next generation radio frequency identification technology. I could barely spell RFID, so did not have any background in electrical engineering nor in business. And so it really was, I say there are three things you need. It's part of it is up here. So it begins with the vision, and eventually turns into some experience and some intellect. It's here, which is the passion, the heart to do it. And the third factor is your gut. It's the grit to go through it. And you reach the end of the world, and it's like, we got to keep going, and you keep going through that. And it's so there are aspects of that so we started in 2003. We did not generate the first dollar of revenue until 2008. So all of my life saving went spent on it, and then we relied upon what's called the 3 F's: family, friends, and fools. And so I had a bit more to get going, who bought into that idea, and so then 2008 we start generating some revenue. All of a sudden we're an overnight success. It's like, no, we've been doing this a while. And by 2009, we were close to actually securing a substantial size investment from a private equity firm, and the US markets went down, and they said, sorry, we can't do this. So that was seemingly the end of the world again, and then we negotiated for our technology provider to acquire us. Thought that was great. Until a couple years ago, when they were then in court-supervised restructuring. And so, yes, in 2010 timeframe, on paper, I had shares in what I created worth in excess of $5 million. Day later, zero. And so I need to share that with you, because that is actually what has motivated me since to work with those, to help them get started, but also help them avoid the pitfalls and to move forward. I mean, I could be bitter and all other kinds of things, but no. And so for me, I've devoted most of my energy in the last decade to helping others. So I mentor startup companies. I started as an advisor with the SBDC, and then I was invited to teach a course, which led into now my new position, which is both teaching, but also being a champion for convergence on campus. So really how we bring multiple disciplines together and work together on real projects, which may turn into fabulous companies, but more especially create these great academic opportunities for students advance and prepare for the world out there.
Audience questions? And how many of you are thinking entrepreneurially right now?
Come on.
Creating visions for new
There we go,
businesses.
there we
Good,
go.
couple of you, all right. I can see the wheels turning. I can even hear them. They're a little, they're a little
Crunchy.
squeaky. They need some oil. Panelists, let's give them some more oil. Thomas Edison said genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Was Edison right?
I believe so. I don't know what genius really is. Sometimes you look at, just keep going. And that's not genius. That's persistence. That's grit. That's the gut. It's the heart. It's the passion. That's where, not that you did, being smart is fantastic, but what does that really mean? I mean, smart in school is one thing. Smart because you can fix a car is another kind of smart. Smart because you can fix air conditioners, you can roof a house. There's all kinds of smart out there. I think in a lot of ways we've pigeonholed a lot of people by what smart really looks like and what genius really looks like. And I really believe genius is should be defined in so many different ways. I mean, there's so many talents. I think every one of us has a superpower, and we just need to really understand that. And I'm not saying like jump off building superpower, but we're not looking at Marvel, but we are looking at, the superpower of we're all really great at something. And I think that's genius. And then I think it's using that to continue on and just keep going. You can always quit. You can lock in your rate. I mean, that's always an option. But the one thing that has been about successes of my companies has been about perseverance.
It's interesting that Edison, who's recognized as a genius, made that quote, because he's recognized as a genius for a small portion of the body of his work, the part that succeeded. There's probably 100 times more of his body of work that he failed. And so it's the ability to, as Churchill once said, when you're going through hell, keep going. And that's really what it's like when you're starting up. You may have these great ideas, but how you deal with the ups and downs, and you just keep going through that. And so it comes back to, I think, Einstein, Edison had some intellect and he had passion for what he was doing, but he also had that grit, that it factor that kept him going. And it's really adapting those. And I would argue for everybody in this room has those three qualities. They've just not been highlighted and honed in the right way.
For me, I think that quote is really interesting because I think, you don't have to be a genius to be smart and do smart things. I mean, I can guarantee you I'm far from the smartest person in this room, but I'd like to think that I make a few smart decisions and do smart things. I think that kind of goes back to just, being careful and knowing how to read people and know how your actions make other people feel. But also the other half of that is, 99% perspiration is literally just showing up. That in and of itself is super smart. Joey says it all the time. 90% of life is just showing up. Even if you show up for your first time and do an awful job, at least speaking from my experience, if you show up and you're excited about it, we'll have you back because that means you'll get better next time. And I think a lot of people that we've worked with have experienced that. So showing up is really what it comes down to, at least in the start, and then applying what you learned by showing up and then showing up the next time.
I would add one other thing, and that is that I know some of the comments you hear are, my gosh, there's going to be a lot of bad moments. This is scary. This is this. I would turn that at perspective and look at it from a different angle. That's the good stuff. I know it sounds weird, but that's the good stuff on that journey. And is when you have the moments, the tough ones, that's when you get excited. That's when you really change your perspective. You move the needle, you move your direction, And it's when you look back again, when you've bookmarked and you look back and go, my gosh, I made that move because of this, where it was, COVID, or whether it was, just all the examples we've had where those bad moments, I actually get a little bit excited about them now. I know it sounds weird, but I start to say something good is coming.
Yep.
And I start looking for it. And it's just a change of perspective. It's taken a while, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to paint doom and gloom on, everything's going to be terrible at the times.
The other thing I will suggest, recommend, and is that entrepreneurship is a team sport. In fact, there's an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's also about building a team, and the team is with people who share that vision, and then have that and share that passion, and you make a team that's you need to have some intellectual diversity to that. What I mean by that is some different points of view and beliefs, but you can align on your vision and you can align on the passion, and you develop that grit, and that's what's going to take you far.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to add on one thing. You mentioned those down moments. It makes me think of a story that people that we work with know well. It was during COVID, and it was a period of time where we couldn't broadcast our typical spectator sports because there were none. So there was no football season in the fall. Basketball was restricted. So that left us with swimming, tennis, and golf. So what did we broadcast? We did golf. And we did a second golf broadcast. We did one, it was a conference tournament. Went pretty well. I ran into a few things, but nothing crazy. So we did a second one because naturally we just had to get ourselves out there and keep going and just, occupy our social media feeds and stay relevant. And so this was a 7-hour state sectional tournament, last round of state that year. We come right down to it. It goes into a playoff. We're thinking, oh man, this is going to be the best moment we're going to have maybe all year. We're going to have maybe 25 people tuned in. This is really exciting. Biggest moment of the tournament. We go and we send, it was me actually, out to serve as an on-course reporter because our cameras had 25-foot cable and we couldn't move further than that. So I was going to go out there and follow the group and report on what was happening back to the broadcast. As soon as I walk away, you can still see it on the camera feed. Camera cuts out, everything goes black, had a complete technical meltdown, and our team just didn't know how to figure it out. So I was all the way out on the green, and I call in to report on, so-and-so's putting for the sectional title, and Joey says, hey, we're not on air. We don't have cameras. Our soundboard and our sound went out. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? Like, that's just not possible. And I'm telling him, you should do this. It's the adapter. And I was getting really worked up and, using some colorful language. Like, it's the adapter. It's this, it's that. We screwed this up. We got to do this. And it turns out the audio to the broadcast was just fine. It was just the camera. And so everybody heard my colorful language, and that created a lot of fun moments over the next few weeks. But we made it past that. We've done a broadcast of golf every year since, and we've done a whole lot more big football and basketball games, and with limited expletives.
And you asked if people are interested in becoming an entrepreneur. I would say hold off on saying no in some cases, because think about it. If you're intent on a career in whether it's working for the alphabet soup of professional sports or television, for example, the same mindset and practice of being an entrepreneur is going to be what's going to differentiate you between you and the people surrounding you. Because again, it's having that open mindset of identifying opportunities, working towards them. But the other thing is, constantly, you are your brand, and how you build that, and how do you project yourself. Mm-hmm. And those are two things that are the primary factors in building an entrepreneurial endeavor. And you are your own entrepreneurs, whether you believe that and you're going to go start your own startup, or you're going to go work for somebody else. If you approach things that way, you're going to go much further than somebody else who comes in and says, well, I'm a technical specialist in this. And so part of it is, again, looking for the opportunities, looking at things with very much an open mindset, and being curious and inquisitive. Those are the characteristics that really are going to set you apart. And eventually you may see this opportunity that you cannot resist seizing, and then come back. We'll help you get started, because if you've done that part, the rest is mechanics.
Philip, you mentioned a little bit ago the word failure. And we know that you three panelists are successful. You wouldn't be on this panel if you weren't successful. But we don't publish failures in your bios. I'm willing to bet that there's been some failures along the way. So can you share with us the great idea you had that wasn't, and what you learned from that?
Before I started Agdiago, the whole idea was I was going to create a company called whatever, but I wanted to take social media sentiment about coaches and say, look, they don't even know you in Nevada, so stop recruiting in Nevada, because the sentiment there is non-existent. Or the sentiment of you in Tennessee is they don't like you. They don't like that school. So don't, look at where you're good at. And we were going through a lot of this, these maps of where coaches were liked and what schools and who had a better geographic reach. And I was hitting the gas and going down that path hard. In fact, that's why I was out in Virginia at my co-founder's now office, because that was what I was going to do. I knew that was the business until it wasn't, and I realized that I was in the wrong, and I knew it wasn't getting the traction I wanted. It was frustrating, and I really felt like started to really feel like a huge failure, and that wow, I've made a terrible decision. But that's why I also go back to say it's those journey points where one bad decision sometimes leads you to the intersection where you need to get to that next thing. And being out in that guy's office, I actually thought it was probably the last time I'd be in his office, because I didn't think I had another reason to go back there other than just we'd be friends and I was going to fail. And then there was a bunch of behavioral scientists outside that door, and it occurred to me on something else. And that's where that bridged together. That was the moment. And again, serendipitous, what have you, but failure led to success. And that, I think, is also the don't be scared about failure.
Well, I started my professional career at Caterpillar, and I was one of those, because of having some superpowers and skill set. I was on the fast track and received frequent and regular promotions, and quite frankly, I hated it. And so I had this opportunity to go work for the Olympics in Atlanta as a volunteer. Okay, now I told my parents, well, that's it, I'm going to go. And they go, you're doing what? I said, do you realize this? I started questioning what I was doing. I said, I can always find a job. If I can't find one, I'll create one. And so from there, it really was a turning point, because I could have gone another 20 years doing that and been doing really well. But so the outside looking in, I was failing my professional career. On the inside looking out, I needed to get out of that. And so it's how you look at some of these opportunities or failures or problems. And so for me, that drove me to actually necessity as the mother of invention, that I spent a couple years working for a consulting firm, sort of learning some additional skills, but I was looking for this opportunity then to converge my sort of professional abilities and my avocation, which was with sports, and especially active sports, so running, cycling, triathlon, and how to bring them together. So are these people still working there? I said, please never call me again. And that really then, so that propelled me now into doing what I do. And I have actually sitting on my shelf in my office over in Beck, I have prototypes of some new ventures sitting there. This past Sunday, I met with a couple of people who want to start and I'm going to be sharing much more with you, all of you in this room, about creating very much a hyper-local sports content collection, delivery, and archival application and building that community. And also, last week was asked to join a company and help a company that essentially has taken the better aspects of Amazon Smile and Venmo, merged them together to make that fundraising capability local. So those are the kinds of things now where opportunities are coming to me. So again, it's that serendipity and luck favoring the prepared. And then we met Mike last night, so.
Larry,
Larry,
any dark
so-
moments that's taught you valuable lessons besides the 25 golf fans that heard your colorful line?
Yeah. There were a few of them. There were a lot of points where it's just like, terrible game. It's just like, this is really rough. But one thing I'll always keep in mind whenever anything's bad, I remember when we first started, me and Joey were driving back from, I think it was our third football game, and we were on a really bad streak of picking games. Usually Central Illinois high school football is pretty good, but you run into some blowouts sometimes. And our first 3 games were all awful. And we're on the, I-74 bridge, and Joey said, well, yeah, it'll just make the autobiography a little more interesting. And I always think about that whenever something bad happens. But biggest thing that comes to mind for me is, so right when we started Clutch, it made us unavailable for Friday nights, which is a big night for Missouri Valley Conference volleyball. And at the time, our sophomore year, that's a big part of our reps and our work with Braves Vision in the athletic department. And so me and Joey had to talk with our supervisor at the time. His name was Tim Rushi, legend, great guy. Wouldn't be where I am without him. And we told him, like, hey, we're going to skip out on Friday night volleyball to go do some football. And he seemed skeptical, but he's like, all right. So fast forward a year to our junior year or so, or maybe even it was later in that winter. I forgot when it was. Clutch was going well. He came back to us and said, hey, I think I pitched it to the athletic department. I think you two are going to be the broadcast team for women's basketball. So one of you is going to call play-by-play, one of you is going to do color. It's going to be good. I'm thrilled because this is huge exposure for 2 college kids on ESPN Plus almost every home game. Really fired up, really excited. Fast forward, like 3 weeks later, we get a call. It was about a week before the first game, and they said, yep, the coach wants the broadcaster from last year back, and so it's out of my control, and we can't have you broadcast games. And that really miffed me and made me pretty angry, but just kind of fueled the fire into putting more effort into Clutch and putting more effort into high school basketball games. And I think that eventually ended up with us getting more broadcast contracts for more tournaments in the area, including the Washington Tournament of Champions, which is coming up next week. We did it for the first time last year, doing it again this year, doing the State Farm Holiday Classic in Bloomington Normal, which is 128 games in 5 days. I don't think any of all that would have been possible if I hadn't resorted to really putting all my efforts into broadcasting for our own company. So,
Thanks, Larry. We're about out of time, but let's end with, starting with Mike, final thoughts, comments, advice, words of inspiration for these students who want to create something like you've created.
Well, again, I believe you all can do it. I know that's simplified, but I do believe that. I didn't jump out of college and just go go become an entrepreneur. I jumped out of college and I actually got rid of sports. I had to kind of refuel my tank. sometimes that has to happen a little bit too. I went to work for a nonprofit, and I made this comment earlier. The executive vice president, the number 2 person at the time, I played golf with him. I was young. I just wanted to play golf. And at the end, he stopped and he said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm going to fire the public relations department." And I thought, well, that's great. He goes, "But not you." I'm like, well, that's even worse, because now I look like the brown noser. And so I'm like, and I said, can I give an opportunity? Why do you want to fire them? He said, "Because you don't make money." And I thought, well, we're a nonprofit. We're supposed to promote our mission, and he didn't want to hear it. I said, "What if you give me 6 months and I show you we make money?" And he gave that to me, and he didn't fire the people. They never knew that. I wasn't a hero or anything. What I did create was a Hallmark holiday. I created National Safety Month, and I went out and found sponsors for every week in the month of June, and we raised about $600,000. And then I got promoted, and they put me in charge of the foundation and fundraising for it, which was not anything I wanted to do at all. And then I spent like the next 15 to 18 years doing fundraising after I left there. But it led me to all these other things. And so it's just, again, that building block. Enjoy that journey, but take risks. I mean, nobody goes to a movie and loves the one that says, "Once upon a time, everything was awesome. It stayed that way, the end." We go see a movie because it has the conflict. It has the comeback, the setback, and the setbacks are all about the comebacks, and that's be open to that, embrace that, and just know that while you go, wow, these people did it. I've seen other entrepreneurs. Literally, I will tell you, you can do it. Anyone can do it. You just have to keep moving.
And adding to that, I will completely add and support the idea that you can do it. And additionally, because I've devoted the last 8-10 years helping develop the ecosystem to support this locally and even beyond. And so, and now personally involved in helping create this. And so I spent essentially 10 years working for a big corporation. I spent 10 plus years creating my own venture. And now this past 10 years and however many more is going to be helping people like yourselves take ideas and turn them into, help you realize them and turn them into something.
For me, I would say the biggest thing that I've learned being at Bradley and working with Clutch and creating Clutch and all that is I want to go into broadcasting. I want to do play-by-play. That's the goal for me. Professional sports, network level, dreaming big again. But what I've found is there's no one specific path to anything, and it's really easy to think that there is, especially, for me in broadcasting. You see a lot of professionals at the highest level, I'm not going to name drop, who, maybe all went to the same school. There are a lot of them that went to the same school, and that school is in Bradley. But, obviously there are professional broadcasters who did go to Bradley, like Charlie, and obviously he sets a great example. But the path is winding, the path varies, and so patience is huge, and also just realizing that everybody's journey is unique, and sometimes it takes unexpected turns. So keep an open mind.
All right. Thank you. I'd like to thank the audience for all of your questions. And I'd like to remind you tonight in the Peplo Pavilion in the Hayden Clark Alumni Center at 7 o'clock, Charlie Steiner's conversation with Bob Lay, two great broadcasters. I hope to see you there. In the meantime, join me in thanking our panelists for this great conversation.
Thank you.